Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 2025 Request for Application webinar with the Native American Agriculture Fund. We're thrilled to have you here today to talk about our organization and talk more in depth about our grant making process. Some housekeeping for today. We will go through a presentation at the top of the hour, but then we will allocate time towards the end of this webinar for you to ask questions. Our whole staff is available to answer those questions. So in order to submit those, you can submit them via the questions box in Zoom, or if you would like to reach out to one of our team members in the chat function, please feel free to also do that as well. We will do our best to answer all questions in the time allotted, but if we are not able to answer a question, we encourage you to include your contact information, maybe an email address so that we can reach back out to you following this webinar to best answer your questions. Also, please note that additional resources will be provided following this question and answer session for those that are not able to have their questions answered today. And this webinar will be recorded and posted to our website along with the slides.
Tilhast, hello. I'm Tony Stanger McLaughlin, CEO of the Native American Agriculture Fund. I'm calling in today from my homelands in eastern Washington state. I'm a citizen of the Colville Confederated Tribes. We are the largest Native American organization dedicated solely to serving Native American farmers and ranchers. Our eligible entities include CDFIs, educational organizations, our entities, nonprofits, and tribal governments, including state-recognized tribal governments. We are entering our sixth funding cycle in 2025, where we are happy to announce that we have distributed nearly $90 million in funding so far. There's a few changes to note in this year's application period that differ from previous years. One of those is in the area of compliance. You have to be in compliance in order to apply for this year's funding cycle. In addition, you are only eligible to apply for projects in length for 12 months or 24 months. And in those funding cycle years, you are only allocated one project modification and one budget modification annually. If you are applying for and receive both a youth grant and a general grant, each one of those is eligible for a modification per funding cycle year. Another change that we have is that we are embracing technology at NAAF. We have a chatbot that's going to be visible on our website that will help answer your questions on this year's application, as well as direct you to the correct person should the chatbot not be able to answer your specific question. We look forward to the 2025 funding class, and in order to assist you in understanding more about NAAF, we invite you to visit our website. Please look at our historical documents and look at our trust agreement in particular to understand where we can fund and if you're an eligible entity. In addition, we encourage you to look at previously funded projects to see if the work's already being done or there's potential for collaboration. We understand that this year, many of you are facing unprecedented funding decline as it relates to federal funding. We realize that you might need to reallocate funding in this year's funding cycle to be heavier in the salary section. That is fine as long as you let us know in the application the pivot in the salary adjustment as well as the justification and how you're working to make sure that your project can still be successful and sustainable. Remember that we cannot guess. We cannot give you the benefit of the doubt in the application. Everything has to be explicit in the application itself. That assists our board members in making decisions on the project's viability and, again, sustainability. We thank you for your continued dedication to Indian country agriculture, and we look forward to seeing this year's application, and we look forward to meeting the 2025 class grantees for the Native American Agriculture Fund. Lim, thank you.
Hello, everyone. And so next we're going to get into the details about our grant making process. But before we do, I wanted to review a little bit about our history and the context of the work that we do at the Native American Agriculture Fund. Our mission at NAAF is to support Native American farmers and ranchers for the advancement of agriculture through business assistance, agricultural education, technical support, and advocacy services. NAAF is focused on healthy lands, healthy people, and healthy economies. We're ultimately investing in work to find solutions to the challenges that Native American farmers and ranchers face to increase access to capital for those producers. So to provide more historical context to our grant making, as it's embedded throughout our grant making process, I want to provide an overview of that history to help inform you the why behind our grant requirements and what we fund. In 1999, the Keep Siegel v. Vilsack class action lawsuit was filed to address long-standing challenges that Native American farmers and ranchers faced in accessing USDA loan programs and credit servicing. After more than a decade of litigation, the case was settled in 2010, leading to an establishment of a compensation fund, along with a debt relief and tax support and programmatic improvements at USDA. Through that structured claims process, more than 3,600 Native farmers and ranchers received compensation, as well as farm debt loan relief, and reinforcing the importance of ensuring access to agricultural lending for Native producers. As a part of that settlement, a cypre fund was created to support the long-term investment in Native agriculture. Following the further negotiations and a second round of compensation payments and tax relief that was distributed, $38 million in grants to nonprofits and other eligible organizations focused on strengthening Native agricultural enterprises were distributed, and those were referred to as the fast-track funding. In 2018, the court directed that the remaining funds be distributed through the Native American Agriculture Fund, which is our organization. It's important to know that our grant making is governed by a trust agreement. That trust agreement guides what we can fund. NAAF is tasked with deploying its resources over 20 years through grants that enhance the business assistance, agricultural education, technical support, and advocacy services. We fund 501c3 organizations, educational institutions, community development financial institutions, or CDFIs, and tribal governments, ensuring that investments in Native agriculture contribute to the broader rural economic growth and food system resilience. So, because of the central issues in litigation that led to NAAF's creation involved access to capital for producers, NAAF requires that all applicants incorporate strategies that will improve access to capital for Native farmers and ranchers in their proposed grant activities. Access to capital can be shown by a number of activities. Just a few examples of that include business planning or market planning training, financial education, credit education for students, or record keeping, credit repair activities, different targeted credit application training or technical supports, different risk analysis or related activities to ultimately prepare Native farmers and ranchers as they seek capital to support their operations and enterprises. As we know, capital is essential and always needed in agriculture and will always be relevant to those who are involved in food and agriculture. And just as a reminder, our mission is to provide business assistance, agricultural education, technical support, and advocacy services to those Native farmers and ranchers to promote the continued engagement in agriculture. So next, I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Programs, Chanel Ford.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Whitney. Hi, all. Thank you for joining us today to discuss our 2025 RFA. My name is Chanel Ford. I am the Director of Programs for NAAF, and I grew up on the Spokane Indian Reservation in Wellpinit, Washington. Today, we are going to talk about the 2025 application, who is eligible to apply, the amounts you will be able to apply for. We'll take a dive into the found and application process and share some compliance notes. Our hope is to make a significant impact across as many Native communities as possible. We're excited to share that this year represents the 7th funding cycle for NAAF. So let's get into it. Listed here are our 4 eligible entities that can apply for NAAF funding. We have 501c3s, nonprofit organizations with IRS Section 501c3 tax-exempt status, or if such status has not yet been achieved, such organizations may apply for funding through a fiscal sponsor that has received such 501c3 tax-exempt status, and I'll go into that a little bit later. Educational organizations tribally controlled or bureau-operated schools, as well as schools operated by an Indian tribe or tribal organization. Community Development Financial Institutions, also known as CDFIs, including certified native CDFIs and emerging native CDFIs. Tribes are instrumentalities. An instrumentality of a state or federally recognized tribe, including a nonprofit organization chartered under the tribal law of a state or federally recognized tribe. I would like to note here, if you do apply via tribe, you will need to submit a limited waiver of sovereign immunity with respect to NAAF's right to enforce the terms of the grant. We're going to go into that in depth a little bit later on in the presentation. Next slide. All right, this is important to note if you are, just to ensure accountability and timely reporting, existing grantees who are not in compliance, such as those behind on quarterly, annual, and final reporting and updates relating to past grant awards and projects, will be ineligible to apply for our 2025 funding. We commit to working closely with each grantee who needs help bringing their existing projects into compliance. So if you need to do so, please feel free to reach out to your point of contact if this does apply to you. All right, so here's that fiscal sponsor information. We encourage startup nonprofit organizations that have applied for 501c3 status from the IRS, but who have not received a favorable determination letter, to apply through a fiscal sponsor, who can also provide important technical support for proposed project activities. If fiscal sponsors are used, the fiscal sponsor must be an eligible 501c3 organization and should follow the guidance in NAAF's fiscal sponsor information. Noting here also the relationship between you, the grantee, and the fiscal sponsor is not managed by NAAF. It is not managed by us. It's the sole responsibility of the grantee. So please keep that in mind when you are selecting, if you're choosing the selection of a fiscal sponsor route. Okay. And here we have access to capital. So you heard our CEO share about this, and also Whitney Sawney share about this. So as you may know, this is very, very important, and it was at the core of this Keep Siegel case. Access to capital can be shown by any of the following types of activities. That includes business planning, market planning training, financial education, credit education for scholastic students, record keeping, credit repair activities, targeted credit application training, or technical support. It could also include risk analysis and related activities to prepare your native farmers and ranchers as they seek capital to support their enterprises. There is a conversation on access to capital on our website. There also is information that you can seek in our RFA overview that's also located on the website as well. The applications that don't address access to capital will not be funded in 2025. So just noting that that's a very important piece to the application process. We'll go over more in depth on the weighted score of that piece specifically later on in the presentation. All right, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Program Officer Riley Dizitel to get into the details about how to apply as a 501c3.
Thanks, Chanel. Thanks everybody for joining us today. As Chanel mentioned, my name is Riley Dizitel. I'm an enrolled member of the Colville Confederated Tribes here in Washington State. I also, as she mentioned, I'm a program officer here at NAAF and heavily involved in our RFA process. As she mentioned as well, I'm a program officer, so that means I'm a point of contact for those 501c3 organizations. In this slide, I'm going to review the targeted projects for 501c3 organizations. As a 501c3, you are eligible for a general focus project, the special focus project, and a youth project that I will review later in this presentation. Our general focus project includes business assistance, education, technical support, and/or advocacy services. The project minimum is $100,000 and the maximum funding is $250,000. The available pool for 501c3 organizations is $1 million. An example of a 501c3 general focus project that we funded in the past was providing culturally specific one-on-one business assistance and technical support to native farmers, ranchers, and food producers. Another project that we've funded in the past was focused on fostering sustainable agriculture and economic independence through a seed to market project that included technical ag training and marketing support. for that special focus project in the 2025 RFA is the infrastructure and climate resilience projects. All eligible entities can apply for this category. These projects are meant to focus in land acquisition, construction, transportation, energy development, and/or climate-related issues such as water scarcity, wildfire risks, and related activities. The minimum amount awarded for these projects are $150,000 and the maximum is $500,000, with the available pool also being $1 million. I am turning it over to our program team member, Dr. Joe Graham, to review the educational organization information.
Oatsi, Hopa, Wahinume, Dr. Joe Graham. I'm a person from the Laguna Pueblo over in New Mexico. I'm the point of contact, the POC for the educational organizations. Riley just described the general focus areas. The educational organizations are eligible for that as well. For educational organizations, the total pool is $500,000. The minimum for applications is $75,000. The maximum is $150,000. In addition, the educational organizations are eligible to apply for the special focus areas of infrastructure and climate resilience. The total pool there is $1 million, and the minimum for applications is $150,000. The maximum is $500,000. Okay, some reminders about applications from educational organizations. That NAAF recognizes educational institutions under the broad definition used by IRS Section 170, subsections B, I, A, and lowercase I, and that includes TCUs, tribal colleges and universities, NAASCII institutions. NAASCII is Native American Serving Non-Tribal Institutions, and of course, BIE schools. Universities with FERTEP agents must include FERTEP activities in their applications. NAAF is very interested in engaging BIE schools and their activities in agriculture. So we strongly encourage them to apply. Some examples of educational projects are, we had a tribal college do a horseshoeing school, which after completed allowed a couple of students to be able to start their own businesses. And another tribal college, they leveraged their funding to build a greenhouse, and not only the greenhouse, but the solar voltaic installation that powers that greenhouse. Okay, and so now the slide is about tribes, because I'm also the POC for grants given to tribes. So let me start with these important reminders. Limited waiver of sovereign immunity. That's required for all tribes, but I'm not going to talk about it. Our CEO, Libby, will talk more about that later. And industrial hemp. Since hemp can be a touchy situation in certain jurisdictions, only feasibility studies or market studies would get to the next level for to be considered for approval. Okay, for tribes, the total pool is $1 million. The minimum for applications is $100,000. The maximum is $250,000. In addition, tribes are eligible to apply for the special focus areas described above. Infrastructure and climate resilience, the available pool being 1 million, minimums 150,000, maximum 500,000. Okay, we heard Chanel talk earlier about tribal instrumentalities. And basically, that's just a subgroup of that falls under the purview of a tribe. It can mean a lot of different things. So tribal governments have the latitude to determine which entities are instrumentalities of their government. What we need from those instrumentalities is the proper documentation of their status. And as you see on the slide, the organization must secure and submit an authorizing document from their tribal government to that specific effect. A lot of them have had specific letters of support and sovereignty waivers passed by council. But there may be other methods, and that could be up for discussion. Okay, and some of the projects that tribes have done is we've had a tribe partner with NAAF funding, partner with their own tribe, and they were able to put up 12 miles of new fencing on their ranges. And another tribe was able to install a bison handling facility for their up and coming bison project. So now I'm going to pass it over to our Associate CEO, Libby, to talk more about a sovereign immunity waiver.
Thank you so much, Joe. Hi, everyone. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Libby Washburn, and I am the Associate CEO at NAAF, and I'm also a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation. And I'm here today to talk to you about sovereign immunity waivers. So NAAF is a private charitable trust created by the 2010 settlement of Keepseagle versus Vilsack. And the final settlement agreement provided for distribution of grants to federal and state recognized tribal governments and their instrumentalities, as we've been talking about earlier. NAAF recognizes that tribes are immune from suit or action as sovereign governments, and that sovereign immunity is vital to the functioning of tribes and all of its subdivisions and bodies. The waiver of a tribe's immunity from suit or action is occasionally required when entering into certain transactions. The court approved the trust agreement that created NAAF, and it contains a specific provision that requires tribal governments to provide a limited waiver of immunity in order to receive NAAF funding. This is the reason that we require this waiver of sovereign immunity. And the requirement stems from NAAF serving as a fiduciary for these trust funds. And we have a duty to protect the funds from fraud and gross mismanagement. So for grant purposes, acceptable waivers of tribal sovereign immunity are limited to the amount of the NAAF grant and the duration of the grant. So if you receive a one-year grant for $100,000, that is what a waiver of sovereign immunity, that is what we would request from you. We wouldn't request anything for a longer amount of time or additional funding. So if a tribe or a tribal entity wants to accept NAAF's grant funding, it must work with the tribe's legal counsel to adopt a waiver of sovereign immunity related to NAAF, and also pass a resolution, create a resolution to be passed by the tribal governing body. So a tribal government and the instrumentality must provide the waiver and resolution within 3 months of being notified that they've received a NAAF grant award. So once we get, you'll be notified whenever you receive the grant award, and then we will immediately reach out to you to start discussing the sovereign immunity waiver. But if you can't do it within 3 months, then we reserve the right to pull the grant back. Also, failure to submit this, so what I just said, sorry, will result in a forfeiture of the award amount. So you've got 3 months to work on this waiver of sovereign immunity and resolution. We do have draft documents, so it is easy to pull this together. Many of you have done this before in the past, and we also have an attorney who works with us who is available to talk to your general counsel, your legal counsel offices. We also ask that the documents be pre-approved. So when you draft them, you send it to us, and then we have our attorney look at it to make sure it's okay. We don't want you to go through any extra steps or spend any time on something that isn't going to meet the requirements of our trust agreement. So it'll save time, and we were able to move them very quickly last year. We are committed to working with you, and can certainly meet with your attorney and kind of upfront try to get this moving before you get too far into the process. Also available to talk more about this when the time is appropriate. So thank you, and I'm going to pass this over to Chanel Ford.
Great. Thank you so much, Libby. I appreciate it. So we're going to dive into the CDFI portion here. So I am the point of contact for the CDFI inbox. If you are a current or past grantee and you are a CDFI, you may have heard from me. Regarding an application via this entity, we hope to see programming that includes loan capital, regranting capital, and technical assistance business assistance. The available pool we have here is $5.5 million. There is no minimum amount, but we do ask that you do not request the full available pool, which is the $5.5 million. This year's CDFI can also apply for the special emphasis category, which is infrastructure and climate resilience. The available pool, The available pool we have is $1 million. The minimum request is $150,000. The max request is $500,000. I would like to quickly share examples of past funded CDFI projects just to kind of give you an idea of what was funded in the past. So one of our previous CDFIs focused on creating a youth scholarship program, and that supported educational advancement in the native ag field, providing hands-on experiences to build youth's capacity to access capital. Another project focused on providing technical assistance and deploying affordable loan capital and grants to native agriculture producers on their reservation. If you have any questions regarding CDFI specifically, or any of the eligible entities, you are more than able to email our organization. We can put those in the chat for you as well. But myself, or you have our info@ email, you can send any questions to, but we'll also open up at the end where we can answer your questions live. So with that, I will go ahead and pass it on back over to Riley, and she will discuss our youth programming portion.
Thank you, Chanel. On this slide, we're going to review our youth programming. All eligible entities may apply for a youth project. Please note that the youth application is combined with the general application this year. So if you applied prior to 2024, it will look a little differently. You must select within the 2025 application that you intend to apply for a youth project in order for that section to pop up in the application. Excuse me. The youth project minimum awarded amount is $20,000 and the maximum is $200,000, with the available pool being $1 million. The youth project is due on the same day as our general application, May 1st, 2025. A youth project that we funded in previous years was focused on empowering tribal gardens by purchasing supplies to promote ag within their youth in the community. They also hosted intertribal agriculture events that shared traditional knowledge from elders in their community. So like I said, the youth project application is in the general application. It is combined and it's all due May 1st, 2025. Thanks all. I'm turning it back over to Chanel.
Awesome. Thank you, Riley. So we're going to dive into our evaluation criteria. So we focus on these specific areas when reviewing applications. I'll go over these in a little more depth, but you can also find this information specifically in the 2025 RFA overview on our website. So we have impact on access to capital. We've shared how access to capital is really important to us here at NAAF. This holds a 25% weight. All applicants will need to identify how and to what extent their project focuses on core access to capital issues of Native farmers and ranchers. We have proposed results outcomes, which holds a 25% weight. When reviewing applications, we'll examine the project approach and we'll look for identified results outcomes of the work. For example, when approaching this area, if you apply as a CDFI, please provide or discuss the amount and number of potential loans or regrants and/or technical assistance provided to Native farmers and ranchers. So our CEO explained at the beginning of the presentation that we want to be able to look at this application fully and understand where you're coming from. We don't want to have to raise assumptions. We don't want to have to guess. We want to be able to read it and understand exactly what it is that y'all are applying for, what the impact is, the results, the outcomes y'all will be looking for, etc. So farmer and rancher demand, we have 20% weight. You should discuss the demand for your proposed activities that exist within the farmer and rancher community that you are seeking to serve. You should also describe farmers and ranchers' willingness to participate in the activities proposed and the indicators, if you have any, that reflect interest in the proposed project activities. So how did you gauge that this was a need for your community? We want you to share that. Team organizational capacity and collaborators, that's a 10% weight. We're interested in understanding the skills, knowledge, and experience of the project team and organization that are going to effectively deliver on the project activities as you've proposed. Evaluation holds 10% weight. The effectiveness of the plan for evaluating and tracking farmer and rancher success or participation outcomes or results is required. So we'll examine whether the proposed results are measurable and whether there's a good plan for tracking the proposed results. So please share in depth here. As I said before, we don't want to have to make an assumption. We want to be able to understand exactly what it's going to be looking like when you evaluate the success of your programming. Innovation and replicability is a 10% weight. So NAAF will evaluate the extent to which the project employs innovative approaches to develop or deliver assistance, technical support, education or advocacy services, and the materials or tools to do so. So thinking, is this something that other organizations or communities could potentially utilize? That's what we're thinking when we're reviewing this portion of your application. Next slide. Awesome. Thank you. So we'll talk a little bit more about the application review and some of the components. So projects should identify 2 and no more than 5 specific, measurable, realistic, and timely objectives, activities, and milestones for the funded activities and discuss the results or outcomes that are expected. So this is kind of what we're looking for when we're thinking of the outcome results-based projects. Access to capital, again, we've shared quite a bit about this, but in your application, please discuss the impact that your project's going to have on improving access to capital for Native farmers and ranchers. Budget templates. So NAAF provides a budget template and budget guidance for the application. You must use the provided NAAF template when applying for the grant. The budget form and the full RFA are located on our website, and also a budget narrative providing justification of the budget is required for each budget category for which funding is sought. So any questions that are pertain to the budget categories should be reflected on the form and can be posed at any time to NAAF staff. So as I said earlier, we have a dedicated team that will be able to answer your questions live, or if you feel the need to email them, if something comes up later, we have our grants at nativeamericanagriculturefund.org that you could submit the questions to as well, and they will be answered. Grantee convening. So we prefer to meet with all selected grantees in an in-person meeting. We also opt to do virtual meetings as well, but we ask that you include at least $1,000 in your project budget to cover at least one participant, one project staff to attend the grantee meeting. And this will be, the grantee convening is for your class, so your 2025 funded projects. We like to get all the funded projects together for that year and just have a really great convening and allow topics to be discussed, allowed to have breakout sessions and all that good stuff. So resume of key personnel, biographical sketches or short resumes, no more than 3 paragraphs, are required for all key personnel. So this gives us this understanding of who's working on the project, who will be responsible for what tasks or leads on tasks, etc. And then cover letters, applicants must include a cover letter from the senior project official or authorized representative of the organization. And we expect to have that signed and dated. And this specifically discusses the project for which funding is sought. Support letters, they're optional, but we encourage support letters. It gives us, the reviewer, an idea of the relationships that you may have already begun to build with other entities, and also, some thoughts on that you are actively bridging gaps in your region or your communities. So with that, I will go ahead and pass it on over to Lenore Moore, our compliance officer, who will get more in depth on compliance and found it and all of that good stuff.
Thanks, Chanel. Hi, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Lenore Moore. I'm a compliance officer here at NAAF, and I'm a member of the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina. And so to dive into the application a little bit more, we do want to preface that we're only allowing projects that are 12 or 24 months long. So if you've applied in the past, you may have noticed an 18-month option. But given the feedback we've heard from our grantees, we've decided to only go forward with 12 and 24 months. Please note that all grants retain the flexibility to complete projects ahead of schedule. We just would like them to either stick to their deadline or be completed earlier if possible. And next, we will go into some budget notes. So NAAF's indirect limit is 15%. And so that will be calculated based on the total personnel and direct sums. So any intermediary funds will not go into those calculations. And applicants must follow the budget guidelines and use the required templates that are provided within the application. And they must also abide by the request minimums and maximums that are listed for each category. And next, some critical deadlines. So for the 2025 General and Youth RFA, that deadline will be May 1st, 2025 at 11:59 p.m. Central Time. And there will be no opportunities to edit or submit the application after that deadline has passed. And so our website that we'll be using is called Found It, and so this is where the application will be hosted. And so if you've applied in the past, you would already have some existing login credentials. But if you are a new applicant or if you do not remember the login from the past application, you're free to create a new account and you can follow the prompts that they will give. And so once that account has been accessed, this will be your applicant dashboard, and you will be able to see your information and any active or historical requests you may have. And so if I can draw your attention to the top left part of the screen, you'll see that icon that says apply. Well, once you click on that, then it will bring up any applications that are available to you. And so it will look just like this screen, except for it will be for 2025. And you will see at the right side of the screen that there is an apply button, and it also tells you that it is accepting submissions from March 1st to May 1st. And that will be reflected on the 2025 dates as well in Found It. And once you click on that apply button, it will take you to this screen, and you'll see that it says application at the top, and it'll still have your information, and you'll be able to scroll through the application and fill it out as you go. You are able to save the application and your progress and come back to it at a later time, but please make sure that you do come back and hit the submit button to make sure your application reaches us.
All right, great, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar. We are going to now move into our live question and answer period. Our Director of Program, Chanel Ford, is going to lead in answering some of our questions. You can submit your questions to the question feature on Zoom or submit via our chat feature as well. We're going to review some of the questions that have already come in. So some of you may have similar ones as we've already gone through the presentation. Earlier, I also shared a link to our frequently asked questions document. You can reference that as you're going through your application. And later, I will also go through a tour of our webpage for our request for applications. So Chanel, I'm going to turn it over to you first, and we're going to answer a couple of these questions that have come through. One being, can we just hit a reminder for folks on the minimum and maximum amounts that are available for the general focus funding?
Absolutely. So for the general focus, if you choose to apply in this category, for educational institutions, the minimum is 75,000. The maximum amount is 150,000. For tribes, if you're applying under a tribe, the minimum is 100,000. The maximum you can request is 250,000. If you're applying as a nonprofit, the minimum you can apply for is 100,000. The maximum amount is 250,000. If you're applying via a CDFI, note here that there is no minimum, but we ask that you do not request the full available pool, which the full available pool is 5.5 million. And then in the special emphasis category, if you choose to apply for the special emphasis area, that is the maximum amount is 500,000 there. So we have had some questions in the past come through about, are you able to apply for both? If you wanted to apply for our general application, you can apply for the general application. And then as we shared in the webinar, the special emphasis category this year is climate resilience and infrastructure. So if you choose to do a project in the special emphasis area, it has to focus on climate resilience or in infrastructure, but the general category can be whatever it is in terms of agriculture. So just noting that you can apply for both of those. All entities this year are eligible for that special emphasis category. Do you want me to read through the questions, Whitney, or?
Yeah, and while maybe you're looking at those questions that are coming through, I want to do a quick tour of our webpage just so you can learn how to navigate and finding certain resources. So give me one moment here and I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so on this webpage, and I dropped the link in the chat for everyone, you'll see that you can navigate through our information to access our overview document. I would recommend this as a really great place to start. This is a document that goes through allowable use of funds, eligible entities. What do we mean by addressing access to capital? We did have another question come through about some of those examples for access to capital. We have some of those listed in this overview document. We've talked about business planning or market planning training, financial education, credit education, record keeping, credit repair activities, technical support, or any risk analysis that's related to activities that help prepare Native producers as they seek access to capital for their enterprises. So this is a really great video as well that will go into more detail on some of those other examples. But this document I know seems overwhelming. It's 24 pages, but as you scroll through this at the very beginning, this table of contents, this will help you navigate to maybe more of your specific questions that you have. In addition to the overview document, you can also download all of the questions that are in the application ahead of time. So you can download the question list for the general application as well as a youth application ahead of time. We also have all of our links to apply via our Foundant grant system that Lenora reviewed. You can get all the information on the deadlines. You can have more access to our other downloads. This includes our RFA budget templates, our budget guidelines, the sample budget narratives, and then also a checklist that was also mentioned in our presentation, which includes what do you need to have ahead of time before you get started. And then beyond that, we have our webinars. We make sure to upload those following each webinar. I think we're gonna have a total for this open period. And then the slides, you can also download those as well. As we go into other tutorial videos, and then at the bottom, we get into our frequently asked questions. And those are broken up based off of different bucket areas like applicant eligibility, as well. What do we mean by certain terms and definitions and terminology, project content, etc. So if you also have a question, we have a new feature this year. It's our chatbot feature. So you can click on this icon down at the bottom. There's some more of our most frequently asked questions here at the top, but you can ask that any question you have. But again, if you don't get your question answered or it's more specific, you can reach out to our team at grants@nativeamericanagriculturefund.org, and someone from our team is going to drop that email address in the chat as well. So Chanel, I'm sorry, I think you're on mute here.
Yep, sorry about that. My dog was barking, so I apologize. I see a question from Tracy. Do you require applicants to use all templates that you provide? Yes. We ask that you do use the templates that we've provided via the application process. They are located in the Foundant application. We're happy to also, if you have questions, Whitney already kind of mentioned this, once you start going through the application, if you have any questions or concerns about kind of navigating through that, you can always shoot a message to myself or shoot a message to the grants at email and request assistance, and we'd be happy to help if there's any issue as you're going along through the application. I see there was a question regarding the competitiveness, Whitney. So there was a question, can you share which category you anticipate being the most competitive? Whitney shared, we do have a competitive pool, but the number of applicants varies each year. We receive a significant number of applications for nonprofit organizations. You can use our resource on our website to see how many entities were funded in each area in previous years. Please note that the amount of projects funded varies depending on the available funding pools that have differed from year to year. So yeah, we encourage you to go take a look at past grant projects that we funded. We do anticipate it being another competitive year, but we review each application thoroughly, and we try to understand trends too in each region and projects that we see that could impact each region or a community or a state, whatever it might be, a county, we take into consideration. So I just encourage you to look at the application, submit your application, and we will do our best to make sure that we select the projects that we believe are going to be the most impactful each year. But I think realistically, each category is different. So like Whitney said, we have a specific number, and I just went through those numbers. We have a specific amount that we have to fund. We have a pool for each one of those categories that we have to stick to, and that we fund out. So it might differ, right? We might fund a $250,000 project, and then in the 501c3, and maybe two more of those are 200,000 and one's 150,000. So it just kind of depends on the budgets and the max and the mins, and but we have to stick to what our pool is. So whatever each pool is in each category, which it's $1 million per category, I believe. That's kind of what we gauge when we're looking at the number of projects that are selected. There's a question, would a letter of support from tribal officials, community partners, and members support the evaluation criteria as well? We do. It's not required, but we suggest that you provide the letters of support. It just shows the context to partnerships and tribal communities that you serve. It gives us an idea of who you're already collaborating with, who you're already working with, if you're bridging gaps in your community or you're attempting to bridge some of those gaps. It gives us a really good kind of bird's eye view of who you're already in relation with. The question, does the access to capital requirement apply to infrastructure and climate resiliency pool of funding? It does also apply to that specific pool of funding as well. I wanted to just discuss too, the question we got last week was in regard to fiscal sponsor. So if you are not yet 501c3 and you are applying via a fiscal sponsor, that is allowable. You can apply via a fiscal sponsor. We do not mediate or control or oversee the relationship you have with that fiscal sponsor. But also just noting too that you have to be actively attempting to also secure 501c3 status yourself. And I believe it will give you about a year to secure that status. So you might have already applied for 501c3 status. You're just waiting for your determination letter. You just haven't gotten it yet, or you're in the steps of getting it. So you're going through a fiscal sponsor. We ask that you are actively trying to become a 501c3 yourself, and we will look back a year after. If you are selected to be funded, we will circle back a year later just to make sure that you have received that 501c3 status.
So we also received a question on audits, but before you answer a question about audits, Chanel, I wanted to address a question that came in about our special emphasis area. So it gave a request among specifics about whether or not a project would be eligible, but I just wanted to provide a background on what we mean by infrastructure and climate resilience. So as we know, infrastructure and climate resilience for Native farmers and ranchers, we're looking to fund projects that address those climate-related issues such as unpredictable weather, water scarcity, increased wildfire risks that either threaten food production or agricultural sustainability. So ultimately, we're looking to seek applications that for projects that develop that regenerative agriculture lens that provide those educational initiatives that benefit those tribal communities and promote climate smart agriculture techniques among Native producers. And yes, that does apply the access to capital, ensuring that those producers have that increased access to capital and looking at it through that lens. Also, we're looking to further support sustainable native food systems. So proposals that address agricultural infrastructure projects, and that can include things such as construction, transportation, irrigation, energy development, logistics, storage, or other related activities. So hopefully that helps answer that question as well. And Chanel, we had a question about audits come through. Can you speak to whether or not if an audit is behind, does that disqualify someone to apply for our funding?
So I believe we have Lucas on the line too, so he can chime in. But I believe as long as you provide the most recent up-to-date audit that you have, if it's years past or 2 years past, you can provide that. And then we'll ask that you send forth the other documentation as it comes along, as you get it. But Lucas, if you're on, if you want to share out anything, if I'm misspeaking on that. I think he's on, or he
Yep,
was on.
he is. So we're going to give him access to speak. One moment, please. I'm going to add him in as a panelist. Thank you for your patience. Oh, sorry. I'm trying to have trouble finding him here. One second. Here we go. Lucas, can you hear us now?
Hey guys, sorry about that. And thank you, Whitney. So yeah, when it comes to the audit, if you don't have an audit, we do request that you submit your updated income statement and balance sheets, and then submit your newer audit as soon as possible. If the audit is older than 18 months old from the close of the RFA process, which would date the audit to 12/1 of 2023, then we will request you to upload your new audit as soon as it's available. Back to you, Chanel.
Thank you so much, Lucas.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Lucas. We had a question come into the chat. Can a tribe apply for their agricultural program? It's not a business, but it's about food insecurity for our community. If you're applying via the tribe, then absolutely, you can apply. If it's about food insecurity, if you're talking about food sovereignty, as long as it's relating back to agriculture, increasing access to capital, absolutely. I think there was a question in here. There's been quite a few that have been answered, so I'm going to try to catch up.
And while you're doing that, I'm going to share another resource that I think what's helpful whenever you're going through your application development to see what's been funded in the past, see examples of what Other entities have been funded for increasing access to capital. So I wanted to share another resource that's available on our website. We have like this database where essentially you can search based off of key terms, you can search off of years or different states, what's been funded in your area. We have other various filters that you can sort through. You can search by youth funding, you can search by different special emphasis areas, fundings that we've supported in the past, again, by locations or regions. So let's say, for example, we wanted to look at what was funded in 2024. I can select 2024 and it will prompt those folks that have been funded in previous years. You can click on their details and then it will provide you some examples of the projects that they have successfully completed or that are currently ongoing. So this is a really great resource for you to look at what some of those past examples are.
Awesome. I saw a question on here I wanted to, so there was a question from Zoe. Would this project meet the requirements of infrastructure and climate resilience pool of funding? Proposal to purchase a biochar, oh my gosh, I'm gonna butcher this. Pyrolysis unit for shared use among native farmers in our area, and we would train farmers on how to use the unit. This can reduce our farmers' dependency on petroleum-based fertilizers, climate resiliency, thereby reducing operating costs, access to capital. That's a great question, and I think a really neat project. We obviously can't say, yes, we would fund that. No, just because Joe made a note in here that we try to stay as neutral as possible. But that potentially could be eligible under both categories. You could apply via the general or the special emphasis, depending on how you would apply. If you're applying 501c3 or if you're applying via the tribe or an edu org, that would make your max amounts differ. But making sure that if you do apply, this would be I think I would say probably go through the infrastructure, the climate resilience route. But making sure if you did apply for both, and I don't think I clarified this earlier, if you do apply for both, if you do apply under both categories, under the general and under the special emphasis, the projects cannot be the same. So they have to be two completely separate projects. So just making sure they can kind of bounce off of each other, but we want to make sure that you're not just leaning solely on the NAAF funding, because say we funded one project and the other didn't, then they wouldn't be able to work. So just strategically think through that. There was a question about technical assistance that we might do in terms of the application process. We're happy to help answer some of these questions and kind of guide you and maybe what might be the better category for you to apply in. Or if you have questions about eligibility and saying, am I eligible to apply under this way, etc. We're happy to answer those questions and can kind of walk you through that process. We can't give specific direction on exactly what you should put in your application. So the technical assistance piece is we kind of walk a little bit of a fine line there, just to be sure that we're guiding you, we're giving you information on how to apply, where would be the best route to apply, but not necessarily giving you the actual verbiage to put into your application, if that makes sense. So any questions, like the question that Zoe asked, that's a fine question. If you think about it later on and you might have more questions kind of in that term, just send them to our grants at email and we'll get back to you.
Thank you, Chanel. We also had a question come through about whether a non-native entity with an MOU partnership with a tribe would be eligible to apply as a lead grantee. So I do want to say that organizations that serve a broader population are eligible to apply. However, the grant funds would need to be directed to serve the native farmers and ranchers. So for example, a youth program that works to help the next generation of farmers and ranchers nationwide could be eligible if their application proposes funding for a program targeted to natives, such as youth on a specific reservation, but not for other programs serving non-natives. So yes, that would be eligible as a non-native led entity. In addition to that, we've had questions in the past that have come through about grantees that have been funded in the past and whether or not they can reapply for our funding. Chanel, feel free to add to this, but yes, you are eligible to apply for funding again. Let's say, for example, that you had a project, but you're looking to expand the scope. As long as you're in good standing on your previous grant projects and you have that expanded scope that goes towards supporting Native producers to increase access to capital, would be eligible. A previous NAAF grantee can apply for funding to continue the work undertaken in a prior project as long as it reaches new audiences or it helps improve on the original project. So not all projects need to be brand new, but they must have a new component added to it.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, Whitney. I don't have anything to add, but maybe that can kind of shoo us into the new information we kind of that we are following this year in terms of compliance. We shifted last year, and we're staying the same route this year in terms of compliance. So we have Compliance Officer Lenora Moore to share a little bit more in depth on that. So if you are a past grantee and you've applied and you want to apply again, you just need to be sure that you're in compliance. She did touch on it in our webinar, but Laura, if you could just share a little bit more about just the requirements in terms of compliance and the reporting and expectations, I think that would be helpful for people.
Of course, Chanel. Hi, everyone. Like they mentioned, I'm Lenore Moore, Compliance Officer here at NAAF. And so I'll just go over a few of the key aspects pertaining to compliance for returning grantees as it relates to this current application process. So, as Tony mentioned in her welcoming speech, all previous NAAF grantees, if they have an active grant with us, they must be in compliance to be able to apply for the 2025 application funds. So that means if you have a grant from 2022 and it is past due, then until that grant is closed out, if it's not closed out before the end of this application, then you would not be eligible to apply for this year. But if you got it closed, later on this year and you came back in 2026, you would be good then. So just making sure that you're caught up with all of your reporting for any of your current active grants you have with us is really important. And especially to make sure that with any future grants you may be awarded to keep in compliance and keep on a timely reporting schedule.
Awesome. Thanks, Lenora. I see a new question from Zoe came back in, but Joe's answering that. So I'll let him answer that question. Let's see here. Thank you guys for these questions. These are wonderful, and we're always happy to get more in depth and happy to help however we can. Let's see. I think these are all answered, and we went over all of them.
Yeah, and I want to bring up maybe just a couple of other ones that we receive on a frequent basis, which is, how do we define youth when we talk about youth funding? So we take a broad approach to defining the audience targeted in the youth category. It really will depend on how your community defines it itself. So typically, participants in youth programs can be from early childhood to 18 years old, but we encourage you to make a clear case of how your project will define youth. So just, Chanel, if you also want to speak to that, when folks are putting information in their application, don't assume that your evaluator knows the context of your tribal community. What agriculture looks like where I'm at in Oklahoma, Arkansas and Oklahoma is very different from where Chanel's at in the Pacific Northwest. So Chanel, can you speak to what it would be like from the point of view of an evaluator?
Yeah, so I'm from the Pacific Northwest, and I grew up my dad raises bison. So our I guess demographic looks a lot different than where Whitney's from. It might look a lot different actually than just Western Washington, right? So the way we look at harvesting and the produce that I have in Eastern Washington is different than Western Washington. And we funded a grantee that had their impact was seafood. So they were focusing on harvesting gooey duck, clams, and they were creating food boxes and giving that back out to elders in their community and also selling it to their local restaurants and their restaurant and their casino to distribute back out into the community. So the impact that has looks a lot different than what the impact would in my region. And I don't, like I said, it's differ. So share with us too. I mean, the number could look different. You could say, if you're in a small reservation or up in Alaska or even in Hawaii, if you're saying this would impact 8 producers, and 8 producers to some might not seem like a lot. I'm from 8 producers is huge. There's only 4 producers on my reservation. So 8 producers, that's huge in where I come from. So just showcasing that and saying for everybody, I know that, but maybe Whitney from Arkansas, she's not going to know, she's going to look at it different and say, let me dig a little bit deeper from this and see what does 8 producers impact? How does that what does that reach look like? How is this going to expand across their community? So making sure that you're expressing that, because we're from different areas, we want to know how this is going to do good in your community, how the response is going to be good in your community. So just keeping that in mind. When you're applying, make sure that you're going at it from a lens of we know nothing and we need to know as much detail as possible, so that we can understand the project, understand the reach, understand the capabilities of it, and give you the best scoring that we can when we're in the review process. I did a question that came through from Zoe. I want to make sure that there's no confusion here. So Joe answered it. There was a question about confusion on how you could be eligible for both categories. So she says, is the infrastructure climate funding only for infrastructure purchases, and the general covers the educational tech assistant component we would provide to farmers? So yes, so the special emphasis is just specific to the climate resilience and infrastructure, right? So what Joe was saying, though, is you could be eligible for both, in that if you wanted to shift this project into general would cover that, right? So we're asking in the general category, I hope I'm not confusing anybody. In the general category, agriculture is broad, right? It's this huge umbrella of how we could fund an agriculture project. The special emphasis, though, obviously we're just trying to stick to the climate resilience and infrastructure, but you could still typically apply for both of them. So if you have a project that you're saying is specific to you're wanting to start a farm, and you're wanting to have community harvesters, and then in turn have them sell their produce at a farmer's market, and then get them into a system where they're able to sell their produce to a bigger market. That's fine. And then in the special emphasis, say that you're like, we need the infrastructure to be able to support these community farmers and these individuals that are going to be pushing this project forward. You could potentially apply for that project that way, if that makes sense. So two areas that you could potentially seek funding in. I feel like I might have maybe just confused people even more, but if you look at our RFA overview, it completely explains kind of what we're looking for in terms of the special emphasis. And if you're applying via an edu-org, what that might look like for you in special emphasis. If you're applying via a 501c3, what that might look like, CDFI and a tribe, etc. So please feel free to take a look at that. And if you need if I didn't answer that clear enough, happy to do a follow-up email, a follow-up call.
Thank you, Chanel. We also had another question come through. I'll either turn it over to you or Riley. But is there a character limitation within the application and what they can input via their responses on the templates?
Specifically for templates, that is a PDF file upload, but yes, there are character limits in the portions of the application that have the text boxes. and those character limits are normally about 10,000 is the general word count for those, but it'll show at the bottom of those text boxes as well.
Thanks, Riley. We had an added question to Zoe's question. Does the project under special focus need to address both? So say both infrastructure and climate resiliency, or can it address one or the other? And Joe answered, no, those are two different areas. So that's correct. You do not have to address both climate and resilience. You don't have to address climate and resilience in your general and climate resilience in the special emphasis, because they're separate categories. So yes, you have to answer to climate resiliency and infrastructure if you apply for the special emphasis. You do not have to answer to climate resiliency or infrastructure if you apply for the general. You can, but you do not have to. The special emphasis, though, since it's specifically we're looking for funding directly correlating to climate resiliency or infrastructure, you do have to address it in that application. I think that's all of the questions we have here, Whitney. These are great questions. And I'm hoping we're doing a good job at answering them. I apologize if you feel like I'm talking in a circle, but happy to expand if necessary.
Yeah, these are absolutely great questions. And I think what is helpful for us and the questions you ask is we can help support you better. And even just as we've been answering some of the questions that have come through, we had a really great idea come from our communications team to think about maybe a graphic that kind of helps distinguish the different funding areas and understanding those different buckets and what can be funded. So we'll make sure to add some of those to our website as we go throughout this period. But we'll also follow up as a reminder to folks that this webinar recording, as well as the download link to the slides, will be available in the email as well as on the website. We apologize for those that have tried to access the slides on the website earlier. That link was broken, but we actually did fix that. It should be, if not fixed right now, it will be within the next hour. So thank you so much for your patience on that. Okay, so with that, I think our questions are slowing down. So here's what we usually do. Our team is going to stick around for probably about 5 more minutes. Feel free to hop off if you've had your questions answered. And then also as a reminder to everyone, you can reach out to our team at grants@nativeamericanagriculturefund.org. But we really appreciate you being here with us today, and thank you so much for the work that you all do. The work that is supporting our Native producers it all happens because of you all. So we really appreciate your time. We're here to support you and answer any questions you have. But thank you again for today.
Yes, thank you. I love seeing all the little emojis pop up. That's so neat.
Well, we had one question come through about whether a culinary class would fall under a specialty area or under the youth category. I know if you want to add to this, but I know in the past that we've had projects that we funded to support uh, culinary aspects of food and agriculture. In addition to that, we've had, like, for example, uh, supporting Indigenous chefs, but they ultimately procure from Native producers. So that helps increase access to capital for those producers that are supplying those foods. I don't know if you can think of any other examples that come to mind, or want to answer this question a little bit differently.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. We have in the past, like you said, funded programs that were supporting Native chefs, and then also were utilizing the produce from Native producers to put into their programming. I think honestly, I think that would be a culinary class. I think could be a good youth project. But that's based off of just thinking about in the past, it would be, I guess, what your demographic is. As opposed to the specialty area, I would think that it would be good to go under the youth category.
Right. And then a clarification came through about procurement for native farms to support those culinary programs. Yes, that would be an eligible project. In addition to, like just as a further clarification in terms of our definition of value-added agriculture. So value-added agriculture activities would allow those farmers and ranchers to capture a larger share of that consumer food dollar. So these activities often refer to some sort of processing activity that increases the value of the raw food products. So for instance, taking strawberries and turning them into jam is considered a value-added activity, and so is taking corn and making a cornbread mix. But it just ultimately means taking that product and marketing through some sort of special branding or marketing activity, which would then ultimately increase access to capital for producers.
I see a question in here from Rosa. She says, as a tribal program, would including our Boys and Girls Club education from the perspective of learning how to grow, cultural components, etc., qualify for education? Again, it's not a BIE education program. It's something we would collaborate with our youth department on. And then Joe says, the way you have it written above, it would be an application from a tribe. So yeah, it looks like this specifically tribal program, including the Boys and Girls Club, that would come from a tribal perspective, a tribal application, you would be under the tribal category. And that's how you would be applying. But so wouldn't necessarily be, you wouldn't be applying under the education entity if that's the question, but it would be an application via the tribe, or maybe even some Boys and Girls Club are through is it the YMCA? Which that would be a 501c3. So I guess I don't know how you would be applying, but as it's written, as the question's written, it would be via a tribe. Boys and Girls Club, a 501c3. So the Boys and Girls Club, I think this is correct, Whitney, correct? They could apply via the Boys and Girls Club if they wanted. That's a 501c3. They're serving their tribal community. But if it's coming from the tribe specifically in support of, they would apply via the tribe. But can a tribe apply under more than one category? So you could apply for the youth programming, and you could apply for the general, or you could apply for special emphasis and you can apply for general. You cannot apply for the same project. So hopefully that makes sense. As long as the projects differ, then you can apply for multiple categories.
So we did have a question come through about one of the questions that's on the application in reference to an overview under the collaborators, cooperators, and leveraging. The question asks, are you willing to work with NAAF to leverage additional resources? So a clarification on what that means, and Chanel, feel free to jump in. But really looking at, let's say, maybe there's an opportunity that we work with other funders that are supporting food and agriculture initiatives. There might be an opportunity for you to leverage the funding that we provided to you for your grant project, and to ultimately you're giving us permission to connect you with other funders or other opportunities in the future. Maybe perhaps if we have funded you and you want to leverage that and add to, or if we weren't able to fund your application, maybe there's an opportunity that's better suited that another funder might be able to help support. And Chanel, you can clarify it unless I spoke to that wrong. I think we're good to go. Awesome.
Spot on.
Okay. Awesome. So we're going to stay on for about 1 more minute. Folks, feel free to reach out to us again at grants@nativeamericanagriculturefunds.org if you have any questions. And again, this webinar recording, as well as our slides, we'll make sure to email that to you within 48 hours. So thank you so much again for your time. And we're going to end the webinar here at 3:20 p.m. Central. Thank you.